The first time Olivia saw the steak on her plate pulse like a heartbeat. She thought it was a trick of the dim lights until it jerked once, like something alive trying to crawl out of the sauce. Olivia Reed had moved to Redwater, Montana for quiet. She'd left behind the noise of Chicago, the endless stress, and a breakup that had hollowed her out worse than winter wind. Redwater was peaceful, small, the kind of town where strangers waved and every shop smelled like pine or bread. But most of all, people kept telling her the same thing. You haven't lived until you've tried Miller's Steakhouse. Everyone praised it, truckers, families, older couples who came after church. The place had been open for more than 40 years, and though the paint had faded, the red neon sign always glowed perfectly, as if refusing to age. It wasn't fancy, but every night, no matter the weather, people lined up outside. Olivia didn't understand the obsession until her coworkers invited her for dinner one Friday night. The dining room was warm and cozy, filled with dim amber lights and the sound of laughter. Photos of hunters, farmers, and local high school teams lined the walls. A giant mural of a black bull stared down from above the bar. There was something unsettling about its eyes, too glassy, too aware, but she shook off the feeling. Miller himself, a tall man with gray hair and a permanent smile, greeted them at the door. His voice was friendly, his handshake firm, but his eyes stayed on Olivia a little too long, as if he were sizing up something he'd been waiting for. "You new in town," he said. "I always know a fresh face. Hope you're hungry." She nodded politely, brushing off a chill that crawled up her spine. When her steak arrived, thick, glossy, perfectly charred, she felt her coworkers watching her. "Try it," one of them said. "You'll understand." Olivia cut into it. Steam rose from the center, carrying a smell so rich it almost made her dizzy. She lifted the piece to her mouth but froze. The steak had moved. Not a lot, just the slightest rhythmic trembling. Like a heartbeat. "Did you?" she started. Her coworker laughed. "Everyone says the steaks feel alive. Chef says it's just how fresh the meat is." Fresh didn't explain the pulse. Olivia forced herself to take the bite anyway, and it was incredible. Soft, rich, buttery, almost addicting. It tasted like nothing she'd eaten before. She took another bite and another, until her plate was empty. That night, though, she felt a faint soreness on her shoulder. When she checked in the mirror, a small reddish bruise had formed, shaped like a bite mark, a human-shaped bite. She brushed the area, it stung. Maybe she slept weird, she told herself. Maybe she was stressed. But by morning, 2 more had appeared, one on her hip, one near her ribs. She didn't dream. She didn't wake during the night. She had no explanation. On Monday, she overheard someone whispering near the water cooler. "Another one," a man murmured. "Found behind the old grain mill. Looked like the skin was torn right off. Just like the others," someone else said. "They all ate at Miller's the night before." Olivia went cold. The whispers stopped when she got closer, but she heard enough. That evening, she returned to Miller's Steakhouse not to eat, but to ask questions. It was quieter than before. No line, no laughter. When she stepped inside, the air felt wrong, heavy with something metallic. Miller wasn't at the door. Instead, a teenage waitress looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Back again?" she asked. "Just need to talk to the owner," Olivia said. The girl swallowed hard and pointed toward the kitchen. "He's in the freezer." Olivia walked past the dining room. The mural of the black bull seemed to follow her with its eyes. The air grew colder as she reached the back hallway. A faint vibration hummed through the floorboards, like a heartbeat echoing in the walls. She stopped at the large walk-in freezer and knocked. No answer. She opened the door. A wave of warm air hit her, not cold, not even cool, but warm like a living body exhaling. Her breath caught. Freezers weren't supposed to be warm. She stepped inside. The room wasn't empty. Huge slabs of meat hung from hooks. But they were wrong. They glistened not with frost, but with sweat, as if alive. Some of them twitched faintly. A low thudding sound pulsed from the far corner, steady and rhythmic. A heartbeat, but not hers. She froze as the vibration grew stronger, resonating in the metal floor beneath her feet. Shadows danced across the walls, shadows of figures hunched over the hanging meat, scraping with knives, sharpening cleavers that had no handles. She could see their faces now, pale, stretched, twisted like burned parchment. Their eyes gleamed with something hungry, and as they moved, she realized they weren't chefs. Not fully. Parts of them fused with the meat, half human, half carcass. Their mouths opened, producing wet, gurgling noises that vibrated in her chest. Olivia backed up, but the slabs of meat shivered. The heartbeats grew louder. They weren't just vibrations, they were calling her, demanding her attention, sending pulses into her skull. She stumbled backward into a corner and grabbed the first thing she could, a metal tray. The figures stopped, turning slowly toward her, their movements jerky, unnatural. Their mouths opened wider than humanly possible. She could hear faint whispers in the vibrations, calling her name. Olivia, Olivia. Her hands shook, tears streaming down her face. She tried to run, but the freezer door slammed shut, trapping her inside. The warm air became suffocating. From the ceiling, the meat slabs began to sway, dipping toward her as if leaning in to taste her. The low heartbeat vibration pulsed faster, harder, until it felt like her ribcage would shatter. In a final, desperate motion, Olivia swung the tray at one of the moving slabs. Her fingers connected with wet, elastic resistance. A scream tore from her throat, not hers, but theirs. The heartbeat faltered, then resumed stronger, louder, synchronized with the thudding of her own terrified pulse. She stumbled backward and tripped over a bucket, hitting the cold concrete floor. The figures closed in. The lights flickered, then went out completely. The thumping continued in darkness. Olivia could feel the meat pressing against her, crawling, breathing, alive. And then, suddenly, silence, dead, absolute silence. When the morning crew arrived, the freezer door was ajar. Inside, the room appeared normal, no slabs moved. The meat hung lifeless from the hooks. Only one thing remained, a faint warmth in the center of the room, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat, just out of reach. Outside, Olivia was gone. No trace, no sign. But every night, Mueller's Steakhouse continued to serve the special beef. And every night, someone new felt the pulse in their chest, the whisper of teeth against skin, the hunger that waited inside the freezer, remembering. The clock hit 3 a.m., and the kitchen lights in Maple Road Diner snapped on by themselves. On the grainy CCTV feed, Sophia watched 3 dead chefs, burned, peeling, smoke-stained, step out of the shadows to prepare a meal. And on the order slip, written in ash-black letters, was her name. Sophia had worked at Maple Root Diner in northern Colorado for 6 months, mostly on the graveyard shift. It was a 24/7 breakfast place off a lonely highway, famous for pancakes the size of plates and hash browns that could cure any hangover. But it was also the kind of place only desperate people worked at, truckers, drifters, and night shifters with nowhere else to go. Sophia took the job because she needed quick money and quiet nights. What she got instead were strange whispers behind the kitchen walls, flickering lights, and a manager who refused to enter the building after 2:45 a.m. Her supervisor, Carl gave her the same warning on her first day. If you hear the grill turn on by itself at 3, don't go in the back. Ever. Let whatever's cooking finish. Then throw it out and don't look too closely. She laughed at the time, thinking it was hazing. But she didn't laugh after the first week, when she heard the spatula scraping against the grill, even though the kitchen was empty. Tonight was different. Worse, the diner was unusually quiet. Even the highway outside seemed dead, like the world was holding its breath. 2 booths were occupied, a trucker asleep face down in his fries, and a couple arguing softly about directions. Sophia felt a weight in the air, a pressure that pushed against her ribs. The neon open sign flickered so violently it buzzed like an angry hornet's nest. At 2:58 a.m., she felt the temperature drop. At 2:59 a.m., the trucker lifted his head just long enough to whisper, "Don't look at them." Then the clock ticked to 3 a.m. All the kitchen lights snapped on at once. Sophia jumped. She hadn't touched the switches. A faint smell of smoke slithered into the dining area, old smoke, the kind that clings to burned wood for decades. She grabbed the monitor for the CCTV feed and pulled it closer. The screen glowed gray-blue as static flickered for a moment, then cleared. 3 figures stood motionless in the kitchen. 3 chefs. She recognized them instantly from the photos on the memorial plaque by the register. A kitchen fire had killed them in 1994, a grease explosion that flattened half the diner before it was rebuilt. She'd seen their smiling faces on the plaque 100 times. Now she saw their corpses. Their skin blackened and flaking like charred paper. Their aprons burned through. Their hats melted to their skulls. And worst of all, their movements were slow, deliberate, practiced, like they'd done this every night for 30 years. Sophia leaned closer to the screen, unable to look away. One chef retrieved an order ticket from the printer that hadn't printed anything in hours. His fingers were skeletal, the melted flesh hanging like candle wax. He wrote something on the slip with a burn pen, smoke curling from the point. Then he stuck it on the rail above the grill. The camera zoomed in automatically, as if something wanted her to read it. In shaky blackened letters was her name, Sophia. Her mouth went dry. She stepped back from the counter, heart punching her ribs. The chefs turned toward the camera, not toward the kitchen, toward her. All 3. Slowly, unblinking. The fire altar skin around their sockets cracked as their heads tilted, recognizing her. One of them lifted a hand and pointed directly at the lens. The static blipped for a second. When the picture returned, he was closer. Too close. Right against the camera, staring into it with hollow eyes that seemed to glow faintly with dying embers. Sophia dropped the monitor. It clattered on the counter, still showing the burned face pressed against the screen. The couple arguing in the booth stopped mid-sentence. The woman whispered, "Don't go back there." Sophia knew she should run. Call Carl, lock the front door. Do anything except walk toward that kitchen. But something pulled her, a thin, invisible thread. A pressure in her skull. A whisper at the back of her neck. The sound of spatulas scraping on hot metal grew louder, sharper, like knives on bone. She stepped toward the swinging kitchen door, her breath coming in short pulls. When she pushed it open, heat washed over her. Not warm, not like a working grill. This felt like stepping into the heart of a furnace. Flames flickered along the walls, moving like shadows rather than fire. The chefs weren't visible, but the room smelled of burning flesh and something sweet beneath it, like caramelizing sugar. The order printer chirped, once, twice, 3 times. A fresh ticket slid out. Sophia forced herself to look. It was blank at first. Then black letters formed slowly, like soot arranging itself. "Bring her in." The words weren't meant for Sophia. They were meant for whatever else was inside the diner. She backed up, shaking. The lights flickered. Something behind the freezer door banged once, twice, violent enough to rattle the metal frame. She turned to run, but felt a hand clamp around her ankle. She screamed and fell forward, hitting the tile. The hand was blackened bone wrapped in blistered skin. One of the chefs was lying half under the prep table, dragging himself toward her with slow, determined force. His jaw hung loose, burned tendons snapping gently as he gaped his mouth open. Sophia kicked wildly, breaking loose, and scrambled out the door into the dining area. The couple was gone. The trucker was gone. Every booth was empty. The diner was silent except for the distant sound of sizzling from the kitchen and the soft hum of the neon sign outside. The exit sign above the door flickered, then went dark. All the windows fogged over so fast the glass cracked. Sophia grabbed her phone to call 911, but her screen lit up with a single notification. New order received. She hadn't installed any diner app. Her hands trembled as she tapped it open. A digital order slip filled the screen. Customer, Sophia Carter. Status, preparing. She threw the phone onto the counter and ran for the door. But when she grabbed the handle, it burned her palm, branding her skin with a blistering heat. She screamed and stumbled back. The kitchen door swung open by itself. Smoke drifted out, curling into the dining area like fingers. The chefs emerged one by one, dragging their ruined feet, their hats dripping melted fabric. They didn't chase her. They didn't need to. They simply pointed toward the freezer. Sophia backed away, tears blurring her vision. "I'm not going in there," she whispered. The middle chef raised a charred arm and tapped the order slip rail with his fingers. The sound echoed unnaturally, as loud as a judge's gavel. The freezer door creaked open on its own. Inside, instead of frost and shelves, Sophia saw darkness stretching into a narrow hallway lined with burned walls. At the end of it, something moved, slow, dragging its feet. She squinted and her breath froze in her throat. It was her, not a reflection, not a shadow. A version of her with skin melted, hair burned away, clothes charred into her flesh. The burned Sophia reached out with a blistered hand and whispered with her ruined mouth, "Order ready." Sophia tried to run, but the floor beneath her shifted, turning soft and hot like the surface of a stove. The chefs closed in silently, guiding her, hurting her toward the freezer. She screamed for help, but outside, the highway was empty. No cars, no sound, no world beyond the diner walls. She felt herself being pulled into the darkness, the heat licking her skin like invisible flames. The last thing she heard before the door slammed shut was the order printer chirping again. When Carl arrived at 6 a.m., the diner was normal, clean, quiet, empty. But inside the freezer, behind boxes of frozen waffles, lay a burned, shapeless body. Its melted lips were still moving, whispering the same two words over and over, barely audible beneath the hum of the freezer fan. "Help me." The first time Marissa saw the ghost sitting at table 17, she didn't scream. She froze because the ghost was staring back at her with the exact same tired eyes she'd seen in the mirror that morning. Marissa Collins has spent 3 years working night shifts at Hollow Creek Diner, a worn-down roadside stop tucked against a lonely highway in northern Wyoming. Locals joked that the place had no business staying open, yet somehow, the neon sign outside kept buzzing every night, even when half its letters were dead. Cars rarely stopped after dark, but the diner always felt occupied, as if someone unseen was waiting in the far corners where the light didn't reach. Marissa didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. She believed in coffee, double shifts, and paying rent. But she also believed in minding her own business, especially when it came to table 17. Everyone warned her that the table wasn't like the rest. People said it had been the center of a bloody rancher feud back in the 90s, that a man had been shot dead while eating a late dinner, and that ever since, the booth was reserved. Reserved for who? No one ever explained. But something about table 17 always felt wrong. Even when empty, it looked occupied. The cushions never fully rose after someone stood. The window beside it stayed fogged even in summer. And the carved initials on the wooden panel JA always seemed freshly scratched, even though they were more than 30 years old. Marissa avoided it. Everyone avoided it. Until tonight. Her shift started at 8 p.m. The diner was nearly empty. 2 truckers, a couple arguing quietly, and a teenager scrolling on his phone. The atmosphere was the usual mix of stale coffee, flickering fluorescent lights, and the distant sound of truck engines fading down the highway. At 9:12 p.m., the humming lights overhead flickered harder, buzzing like hornets trapped behind glass. Marissa wiped down the soda counter and glanced, out of nervous habit, toward table 17. It was supposed to be empty. It had been empty 5 minutes ago. Now it wasn't. A man sat there, middle-aged, damp from the fog that clung strangely to him. His clothes were outdated, his posture stiff, his face pale like something pulled from a fridge. Marissa hesitated, heart thudding. She hadn't seen him come in. The doorbell hadn't chimed. No footsteps, no draft, yet he was there. She approached slowly. "Sir? Can I help you?" The man looked up, and her breath hitched. His eyes were milky gray, unfocused, like he was staring through her, not at her. "Table 17, he murmured. "I'm supposed to be here." Something about his voice made her skin crawl flat, emotionless, distant. Do you want to order?" she tried. The man blinked slowly, as if the action required effort. "Already did." "With who?" Marissa whispered. His gaze drifted to the empty seat across from him. "My daughter." The words hit her like ice water. Because she knew this story. Everyone in town knew this story. Jonathan Avery, shot during a property feud. His teenage daughter went missing the same night and was never found. And Jonathan Avery's booth was table 17. Before she could move, his hand lifted, trembling, reaching toward her. "She never came home," he whispered. "I keep waiting." Then he vanished. Simply blinked out of existence like static cutting off a screen. The booth's cushions deflated as if someone had just stood. The window fogged over instantly. Marissa stumbled back, knocking over a sugar caddy. Her breath shook so hard she could barely inhale. She wanted to run. Call Mr. Lowry. Quit. Anything. But the diner suddenly felt deeper, darker, as if the walls had stretched farther away. The neon lights dimmed until the whole building fell into a reddish haze. The air hummed low, vibrating through the counter, through her bones. Then the chairs at table 17 moved. Together, slowly, scraping outward in perfect unison. Inviting. Marissa shook her head. No, I'm not sitting there." A whisper brushed her ear, warm and cold at the same time. "You already have." Her vision blurred. For a moment she wasn't. Tea in the diner, but inside a flickering memory sitting across from a shadowy figure whose face looked like hers, only hollow. The lights crackled. The buzzing grew louder, becoming something like voices layered, distorted, dozens speaking at once. "It's her turn," one voice rasped. "She stayed past midnight," said another. "She saw him," whispered a third. "Take her seat." The emergency lights snapped on, painting everything red. Table 17 scraped closer, not the chairs. The whole booth dragging a few inches at a time, like a living thing crawling toward her. Marissa ran. She darted into the kitchen, slamming the door behind her, forcing the lock with shaking fingers. She pressed her back against the freezer, panting, sweat mixing with cold air that smelled like metal. 3 soft knocks tapped on the door. Polite, rhythmic. "Marissa," her own voice said from the other side. "You forgot to clock out." She covered her ears. "Go away." The lock clicked, slowly, deliberately, turning by itself. The door creaked open. Nothing stood there. The diner beyond was dark, silent, empty. But the chrome counter reflected her face, and her reflection wasn't mirroring her movements. It smiled when she didn't. Marissa dropped the knife she'd grabbed. She backed away until her shoulders hit the freezer. Her reflection tilted its head, studying her like prey. Then it turned and walked toward table 17 on its own. She bolted through the back exit into the storm, running until the rain became mist and the mist became dry highway air. She didn't stop running until she reached the edge of the next county. She drove through the night, didn't return for her paycheck, didn't pack her locker, didn't tell anyone goodbye. But some nights, especially at 12:17 a.m., she feels someone sitting across from her, not touching her, just watching. And in windows or mirrors, she sometimes sees a booth behind her, table 17, waiting, and when she blinks, her reflection smiles first,